Hi, I'm Grace Lynch. Welcome to my channel, Wilderness Chronicles. This one is going to be a little change up. I was going to save the body of trauma work for a little bit later, but an unexpected thing happened. I was watching an episode of Fringe, and they talked about Magellan circumnavigating the globe. And it occurred to me that that's a really elegant way to frame how I think about how I approach trauma resolution. Now, to give a context, because I lost all of language and meaning scaffolding when I was 22 years old, and then lived that way for the rest of my life, I'm not able to make use of standard cognitive tools for any form of treatment at all. I don't cognate the way other people do. I don't experience shared meaning. I don't experience perseverating meaning. I don't experience fixed meaning. I don't share any cognitive space with anyone because inherent to the experience that I cognate involves sensory modes that other people don't experience. So it's like living in a different world. It's not logical for me to feel that I inhabit the same meaning world in a way that is significant or relevant or comprehensive enough for me to entrust trauma to it. And the professionals that are available to me have sort of come to an agreement that I'm sort of clinically unique. But because of that, my trauma doesn't care if there's a treatment paradigm for it. It goes right on being trauma, and that includes nightmares and panic attacks and rage attacks and shutdowns and freeze outs and all kinds of things. And so to survive post-brain rehab, I've had to come up with my own techniques and sort of models for what I imagine trauma and emotions are all about. And so this video is about the circumnavigation of trauma. I want to read my little disclaimer here. The concepts and methods presented here are my own original work, unless otherwise cited. I'm not a licensed professional in any capacity. These are simply the tools I have developed to use and used to navigate my own life and circumstances. Any meaning, value, or application this work holds for you is entirely yours to determine. So, the key part that I've had to use and learn how to use and access to survive at all, recovery, trauma, conflict, any of these things, simple emotions, is to cultivate the capacity to have a feeling without narrativizing it, without turning it into a cognitive thing. The short version of this, I wanted to make a t-shirt because in standard 12-step recovery, I'd hear the statement over and over again, feelings are not facts. But my writing mentor, many, many years ago, told me that feelings are first and encouraged me to tell the simple truth in order to become a writer and develop as a writer. So how could feelings be first and then not be facts? And so in my own life, when I found myself without treatment, but having to cope with all the reactions and things that were coming up and not having any scaffolding to constellate it, I could remember what feelings had been in terms of the language, but I didn't have a way to connect them to the experiences. And so when I found myself having to build a life, but with no treatment or understanding, this is a long, long time ago, then I guess I'd give more backup. They had put me in state hospital in 1994 for 3 months because nobody knew what was going on with me. And it turned out that on no medications at all, in a quiet, controlled, safe environment where it was predictable, great for an autistic mind, I was very calm and could do okay. And I thought they should keep me there for the rest of my life. So after 3 months, when they couldn't find anything wrong with me, they arranged a housing program, and I was put out on my own, and I started exploring 12-step recovery. But it was really when I was put out of the hospital, disappointed that they weren't going to keep me locked up, because that's where things made sense. that I realized I accepted. The marriage was over. I couldn't get back into school. I couldn't figure out what to do. I didn't know why my brain didn't work. And I thought, well, if I can't do anything useful, then at least I'll figure out how to be honest with myself about my life. And I remembered what Tony had said, my professor, Dr. Anthony Baccioni at SUNY Rockport. Feelings are first and tell the simple truth. And so I didn't know if I actually had feelings without any tool to identify them and do language about them, because my aphasia left that permanently broken. I could remember the words, and ideas and concepts of feelings, but I couldn't remember the experiences that they connected to or had ever connected to. I couldn't figure that out. The piece was the bridge was missing. So I wanted to know first if I had feelings, and so I spent a day where I went through my apartment and I chose things in my apartment to destroy, and I took books down and I ripped them to shreds, and then I moved to the kitchen and I took dishes out and smashed them on the floor, and it took about 20 minutes, and it got stronger and stronger and stronger until I was picking up a chair and I was going to throw it through the living room window. And then I processed, dude, if you do that, it's going to make a lot of noise, and somebody's going to call, and police are going to come, and they're going to take you away to the booby hatch. So you maybe want to stop. And so I did. I put down the chair, and then I processed, oh, so I guess you have anger. And that was how I slowly rediscovered that I have feelings and what to call them. Not what they are, but what they do, how they felt, the physical experience. And so in the weeks following that, this was in I think June of 1994, I similarly discovered fear, shame, and sadness, and joy sometimes. I was living in a shitty apartment. There were cockroaches and bugs and mice and stuff, but it was mine. I'd never had my own place before. And so I was learning how to have the feelings, and because I was getting sober at the same time, I thought that I had to get sober, I wanted to go to the 12 step rooms because there were people that would let me hang out and not be mean. It was only when I made a concerted effort to simply face and experience my feelings and survive them and tell myself the truth about what they were as I found that out, that I found I instinctively wanted to drink or use drugs to assuage that. I didn't know when that had happened to me. It happened a long time ago. And then I understood that I had a kind of problem. And so for me, on a practical level, if I wanted to practice being in touch with reality, it didn't make any sense to practice and then take breaks through recreational chemistry. But when I felt I genuinely wanted to be sober and clean and didn't know how to, I physiologically wanted to go back, even though I was completely off of all the things. I understood that I physiologically had some kind of an issue. And so that became the foundation of my approach to 12-step recovery. Regardless of the fellowship that I was in. The life that I want is at odds with how I respond to life. So it took quite a while, but I learned and practiced how to have the feelings and not have any idea what to do with them, because I wasn't operating from a narrative. I was having the raw experience of them. And then they would come up and I wanted to contextualize them or narrativize them or make them go away or solve them. And if I couldn't do any of those things, which I couldn't because I couldn't figure out how to get the words anymore, I wanted to escape through drinking or recreational chemistry, which I couldn't do because I was in a recovery plan. And that gave me no out whatsoever. And what I found was that I could outlast the initial threat response. And when I did that, the emotions ran their course. And I learned to have a feeling. And that's when I discovered that the experience of the feeling and the narrative of the feeling are two different things. And I further beyond that, feelings are facts. They're just not instructions. And I want to make a t-shirt like that. Actually, feelings are facts, perhaps the first and only facts, but they're not instructions. They're not indications of what I should do. They're indications about what I am. And so that became a cornerstone of my life and recovery, and it has been now for 31 years. So in terms of trauma, it's the same kind of thing. Because I didn't have any cognitive resolution for trauma, but the trauma kept happening, and I didn't have any inner apparatus to resolve it, I had to use the same kinds of techniques. I had to have the trauma triggering and outlast the biochemistry of it. And I could not turn it into a context, and I couldn't escape through recreational chemistry. There was no medical treatment. There was no medical model because I was clinically unique neurologically. I didn't have any choice. If I wanted to survive, I had to survive through the trauma reaction and still have the experience. And so working with trauma became a way of learning my way of processing difficult experiences. And I think everybody has their own way. But one of the first things I had to learn was that there's sort of like a trauma and its echo. There's the experience of the trauma physically, and then there's the added trauma or the next dimensional trauma of the brain trying to understand what the trauma was. And when the brain can't resolve that, it's an entirely different kind of trauma. There's the physical event of what happened that's overwhelming, and then there's the brain's event of trying to regulate the body, which is its job. When it can't do that, that's its kind of trauma relative to the body. So the brain, the way I imagine it, the brain is reacting to a trauma of the body the same way that the body was responding to a trauma in the world. And it's actually got two components. I didn't know this. I would equate the event in the world as the crisis of the mind to contextualize and express it and relate it. That's not true. It's a naive understanding. It was a naive understanding of what experience and trauma actually are. And so I'm watching Fringe today. I'm rewatching it, binge watching. I love Fringe. And we're in the one about where they're trapped in the building. And Dr. Bishop talks about Magellan circumnavigating the globe. And it occurred to me that's a wonderful model for how I think about trauma and its resolution. I don't defeat trauma. But my understanding, albeit limited, of biochemistry and physics and science is that there's no such thing as a permanent chemical reaction. A chemical reaction must run its course. It must resolve, and it does resolve every time. There's no such thing as a perpetual energy machine. And so the implication that there's an ongoing chemical reaction that never resolves, and that's what emotions must be on some level, implies something that contradicts what I know to be true from thermodynamics and science. Because I trust the model that says that entropy increases and there's no such thing as a perfect chemical reaction and it can't go on forever, I reason that my supposition that the chemical reaction of the initial response to trauma is the entire picture must be incorrect. There's something else going on. And that's how I started to dismantle that actually there's two aspects of trauma. There's the physical experience, and then there's the brain's inability to resolve it. And what I'm coming to understand is that I think what I've been doing in this breaking out of a linear approach to trauma to more of a circumnavigation of trauma is that what I found is that the mind will endlessly try to update itself. If it can't do that, then it will reach a crisis point. The problem is that the body will upgrade the mind, but the body will never step in until the brain surrenders. The body will not do without an operating system. But if the brain is saying, I've got this, then the body will leave it alone and respect the sovereignty. But if the brain surrenders, like in the cases of powerlessness and certain other things, say, I don't know, and surrender to the experience of the body has the capacity to upgrade the consciousness into something that's a new operating system that encapsulates the entire picture. And then the brain can catch up and understand it later. But the difficulty is believing that if I don't resolve the trauma cognitively, I won't survive it physically. And that is an illusion of contextual narrativistic thinking that actually is pretty naive, and it's a default setting, and it is not true. It can be outgrown. It turns out that does not have to stay in the fused default setting. And what I've done, what I use language box work for and other forms of 12-step work, is to develop the capacity to place a mind where those two can be uncoupled safely and experience what that's like and find my way of using those like new muscles, like learning how to walk. But that means surviving the initial impression of the trauma and coming to the thing where the brain cannot process it and stopping freaking out and outlasting the threat response to a new experience of having survived all of that. And that's part one. I'm going to do part two to complete this arc. Keep them 15 minutes.